The world of Fallout has many terrifying and seemingly cosmic creatures pulled from the darkest depths imaginable. Genetically engineered lizards standing 15 feet tall, amalgamations of pulsating flesh slowly shuffling on legs both human and animal. But sometimes there's a creature that could be considered normal. Roaches, scorpions, and flies to name a few. But there is one that stands out from the rest, and that is, of course, the Cazador. But what is a Cazador? How were they made? And where do they come from? Cazadors, which is Spanish for hunters, are incredibly large insects that can usually be seen quite some distance away, due to the 4 distinct orange wings and almost silent yet erratic movements as they dart from place to place in an unpredictable pattern. Getting closer we can see a blue-black carapace, blood-red eyes, spiky abdomen, and long twirly antennae, giving this creature both a somewhat normal yet scary appearance. If this wasn't frightful enough, they are capable of killing the heartiest of foes due to their numbers and tendency to swarm, coupled with a dagger-sized retractable stinger full of deadly venom. Fortunately, getting stung isn't the end of the world, as Wastelanders have a number of methods to counteract this venom. Tourniquets, healing powders, or even a simple stimpak can be enough to survive the encounter, or at least survive the venom, as their high numbers and tendency to swarm, stinging rapidly with deadly accuracy, is more than enough to kill your average human. Cazadors tend to have very little competition in terms of land and prey, seen both swarming mountainous regions of the Mojave, but also the water's edge of lakes, and even deep underground, showing they have very little opinion on where best to settle, and likely infest the areas that are rich with food and pose very little threats to their eggs. Areas infested with Cazadors are distinguishable by the many large basket-shaped nests, which the insects form by chewing wood fibers into a papier-mâché-like substance, which is then stuck to the walls of cliffs and the corners of caverns, and can be found at places such as Bonnie Springs, the Cazador Nest west of the Brewer's Beer bootlegging, and other places with Cazador activity. But where did they originally come from? Before we had the opportunity to travel to the Big Empty, a crater filled with all manners of science, the origins of the Cazador was thought to have been due to radiation, which affected other insects. It was a logical thing to assume, but the Big Empty houses a specific scientist of particular interest concerning the creation of the Cazador, and that is Dr. Boris. By asking Dr. Boris who he is and what he does, we can learn.
Before you is the brain of Dr. Boros, head of animology, beastology, and DNA scrambling technology here at Big Mountain. I lay the bones and hearts of animals bare beneath my searing gaze, especially the dogs. I did so love dogs once. Especially Gabe, that rascal. But there are many animals to shape. Industrious Cazadors, the happy-go-lucky Night Stalkers. They are my living, breathing DNA test tubes.
So Boris is responsible for the creation of Cazadors. Of course, we can pursue this further, just to be sure.
Indeed. Docile, curious, safe, sterile. They are contained here at Big Mountain to preserve DNA and for observation.
Now there's a number of things wrong with what he just said, but let's begin by telling Boris that the Cazadors are not contained within Big Mountain and are in fact seen swarming the Mojave Wasteland.
No, such creatures are found only here, for research purposes. They would no more be capable of escape than breeding.
So not only does he believe they haven't escaped, but he also believes them to be sterile, which is just absurd. We've seen their eggs firsthand. but let's see why he believes they haven't escaped.
Because big mountain safety measures are far more sophisticated than their primitive animal instincts. We are their lords and masters.
And that's his reason. Because humans are far more sophisticated than their primitive animal instincts. Now let's see what he has to say regarding their ability to procreate.
I cannot expect a lobotomite to understand the careful surgical castrating procedures used in their creation. Perhaps a demonstration of my castrating power would settle your doubts.
So the Cazadores were individually castrated. Not only did Boris fail to contain them, but he also failed to take away their ability to breed. Now we can confront Boris concerning the robustness of his research, but he doesn't much like that at all, and no matter what, will pretty much disregard anything we have to say about his industrious Cazadores.
Nonsense! That is what you speak. Nonsense from beyond. I was at the top of my high school class in American high school. I knew facts. I knew figures. I knew data. We would know if our research was flawed. It is not. We never contradict ourselves, so do not even try.
Other than this, we can learn an approximate date of creation, and the mention of a tarantula debate, and something about hawks, which are both clues as to where the DNA used to create Cazadores came from.
In 2000, carry the 3, then count backwards from the Great Static, or beyond, there were the tarantula debates, and something about hawks, which made it around 2003, May, Tuesday. It was definitely Tuesday.
The tarantula debate, as Boris so elegantly put it, was most likely on the subject of whether or not tarantula hawks were, as their name suggests, actual tarantulas. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't also discuss whether or not they were also hawks. But Boris's less than trustworthy statement is given a little substance due to the name of the facility where they were created, and that was of course the Z14 Pepsina DNA Splicing Lab, which is the real-world name of the subfamily of the spider-wasp family, which also includes the tarantula hawk, a real-world wasp that hunts tarantulas. Female tarantula hawk wasps will hunt during twilight, flying low to the ground in order to detect the scent of a tarantula's silk curtain. Once the wasp has detected a silk curtain, it will interact with it, agitating the tarantula into coming out to fight. Now the reason the wasp waits for the tarantula to fight is because it will rear onto its hind legs before attacking, and this is the point where the wasp will strike, aiming for the nerve center beneath the tarantula's legs, causing paralysis. Once the tarantula has stopped moving, the wasp will drag it back to her burrow, where she will lay a single egg on the tarantula's abdomen before leaving the burrow and sealing the entrance behind her. This egg will develop and hatch, releasing the larva, which then burrows into the tarantula's abdomen to feed. And if you didn't think that was gross enough, the larva will intentionally leave the vital organs until the very end to ensure the tarantula remains alive for as long as possible. Now we don't actually see Cazadores hunt this way. Instead of finding a burrow with a still living human or livestock, paralyzed and half-eaten from the inside out, we find eggs, sometimes singular or clustered together into a small mound. So perhaps there was some other DNA used to create the Cazadores that altered the way they rear their offspring. If we head into this lab where they were created, we find the Cazadores' original breeding ground, where many of their eggs can be seen, proving Boris wrong. If only he would have checked sooner, the Mojave might have been spared from their venomous stings and persistent behaviour. One of the final rooms has the operating table where the insects were most likely castrated, albeit poorly. So now we know where they come from, But there's still one thing to talk about, and that is the different places and the types of Cazador that can be found throughout the world. We already know of the standard Cazador and their smaller, younger versions, but out there in the Mojave Wasteland is a Cazador with legendary status. This fabled wasp can be found lurking deep in the bowels of Silver Peak Mine, and is truly a foe to be reckoned with. Back in the operating room of the Z14 Pepsina DNA splicing lab is one of the last remaining original specimens created by Boris, known as Specimen 73. And although it isn't strictly mentioned, Specimen 73 could be the entire reason that Cazadors are seen elsewhere. After having escaped confinement, she continued her species. We know that Cazadors escaped from Big Empty and travelled to the Mojave Wasteland, but they have also travelled to Zion and are arguably one of, if not the most vicious creatures found here. Their size, which is considerably larger than your standard Cazador, could be down to the clean drinking water and abundance of fresh food found throughout the canyon, or it could be down to the hearty geckos and yaoguai that they have to compete with, and as a result, only the largest and strongest Cazador have survived. So Cazadors, while seemingly normal, if not a tad big, are genetically spliced tarantula hawk wasps that are a little different in terms of procreation and hunting when compared to their unaltered ancestors, but still they remain ferocious and effective killers, swarming together to overthrow the giants of the Mojave. So the next time you see a sign telling you to keep out, you might want to listen. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you would like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.